and hand it back to Sam.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to get started now for some JOFJ testimony training. And what's our next slide? Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with talking about how we submit testimony for JOFJ, and we'll also start off by saying what we're focusing tonight on is just written testimony. It's not that we don't do verbal or oral testimony, but the bulk of our work with JOJ is written testimony. So we're going to talk most about that. If you have questions about oral testimony, I'm happy, Eliana and I are both happy to stay on later afterwards. Also, you can feel free to email and contact JOJ staffer at any time, and they're happy to talk to you about that. So, okay, so submitting testimony for the General Assembly. It's important that we are submitting these personal stories, that we understand you don't have to be an expert. Almost nobody in JOFJ who submits their testimony is an expert. It's really great when somebody is. It's nice to have expert testimony, but mostly your power is in your constituency. You are somebody who lives in your district in Maryland, you're somebody who votes in that district, and so the assembly works for you, and you are letting them know what your feelings are on one of these issues. So that's where all of your power is coming from. Having an emotional story is good, right? Because like we as humans respond more to emotion than we do to the facts and the logic sometimes. So it's absolutely okay, because if you have an opinion, which you do because you're here with JOJ, so you obviously feel some sort of way about something that we're talking about, then that's all you need to be able to do this. Next slide, please.
I think before I put up the next slide, I'm going to screen share an infogram so folks can see our growth in Maryland around testimony in particular.
Okay, so this is really neat. So JOJ has been keeping track of how many pieces of testimony have been submitted on our behalf, or by JOJ every year. And last session, Eliana started making it into these really beautiful graphics, so we can visualize just the incredible growth that we've had. So we have action alerts that go out. So that's when you get an email from a JOFJ staffer that allows you to like click on something that brings you to, if you've never seen one, it brings you to like sort of a form page where you have put in your address. So it's pulling up exactly who your representatives are, and you can fill out a letter directly to them. So that is sort of a direct action to let your legislators know how you're feeling about something. And then, of course, we have the actual testimony that is your opinion about a specific bill that goes to the committee that is hearing that bill before, so that hopefully the committee will either not vote the bill out of committee if we are opposed to it, or will vote it out of committee if we are in favor of it. And as you can see, the pieces of testimony that we have submitted went from 25 pieces of testimony in 2018 to 200 last session. So that's just an incredible rate of growth. Very exciting.
Great, thanks, Sam. And before I put the slideshow back up and we hear about what testimony will look like this year and some other pieces, Anna, I know you talked a little about this during the rounds, but I know you also have a really great story around testimony and its impact.
Right. In this particular instance of the virtual testimony, I think it was first of all, I think it's a very empowering experience to do it, because you feel you're part of a larger movement. And, you know, it's like going to a good demonstration. You know, it makes its point, but it has an effect within the community. And in this instance of the Liberty Act, and also when I testified in 2019 for CASA, we had hundreds of people. In 2019, we had hundreds of people in Annapolis. And we had something like 65 people testifying in Howard County last year. And the other side had 12. So, and of course, I'm a child of immigrants. I work with Syrian American immigrants. I mean, my son is an immigrant. It's just, I'm dyed in the wool. You know, this is passionate from day one. So I think it's just crafting your story and taking those personal details that are the very things that motivate you, are the very things that need to be said, as everyone has underlined, with, you know, tapping into the emotion, the deep feeling we all have about these issues. And the more personal you can get, the better. She's no longer here working in Howard County, but I want to just tell a tiny bit about Rabbi Sonia Starr, who's been very instrumental in immigration action in Howard County up to the time that she left Columbia Jewish Congregation this summer in order to work for the Reform Action Council and be full-time working on social justice. But she had an incredible story of her parents, her grandparents, all of whom were immigrants. And she traced it back to her, even before her grandparents. And it's just very powerful. I still think about her story and her family story. And I think when you speak from the heart, it makes an impact. Can we always change votes? No. But we can show our muscle. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Anna. I think as Sam continues, I think there's so many threads of the story you just shared that we'll hear throughout the rest of the presentation. And I'll pass it back to you, Sam.
Thank you. Okay, so submitting testimony in Annapolis prior to a global pandemic, what would happen is you would turn your testimony into JFJ staff, and they would edit it and make sure that it was printed out and handed in on the day of the actual hearing, because the rules were that day of the hearing, by a certain time that day, it had to be handed in person, like a hard copy. Last year, that everything was different, and so they were taking submissions through the General Assembly website, and JOFJ staff were still submitting on behalf of people to the through the Maryland General Assembly website. This year, it's unclear if Annapolis is going to be in person, or if it's going in person, meaning that constituents will be allowed to show up in person. The legislators were for some time still there in person themselves, but no one else was allowed in. So it's unclear if it'll be like that, where we can't go physically. And so that means that our testimony does not go physically, it gets virtually submitted, or if they're going to be back to having us be there in person, we're not sure. So once we know, staff will be sure to thoroughly update people. It won't just be a one-off email. We'll make sure that everybody understands what's going on. In the meantime, we are assuming it will be just like last year. And so that all testimony will be submitted through the online portal. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how that setup is going to work, because we've also, if you've submitted testimony for the General Assembly, for JFJ in years past, including last year. We've changed it up this year to make it a little bit easier for staff. So we'll talk about all of that in a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about actually writing the testimony. There is a pretty well-known quote by a writer, his name just escaped me, Mark Twain. Mark Twain, writing a letter to a friend, says, I would have written you a short letter, but I didn't have time. So I'm writing you this longer letter. And I think that that really perfectly surmises what it's like to try and write testimony, which is if you have the time to try and be concise, that's awesome. If you can get it to, like, fitting it to one page is just the perfect amount, because volume of separate pieces of testimony is great. So the fact that like 30 people might write testimony is perfect, but having a 30-page single testimony is not useful. So when you're writing, try and be concise, making sure that you've specifically identified that you are in favor. So we have, you'll see that we have templates to use, and you'll notice that the first line of the template is like, I am in favor of, or I am opposed to, because like you just want to off the bat let them know, because worst case scenario, if nobody reads it, you want them to, and they're just flipping through, you want them to have seen that. That's worst case scenario, but best case scenario is that, you know, people are actually reading the testimony, and they do. Oftentimes the legislators who take the time really do read it. And so you're gonna state your position, and then, you know, why this is important, what that heartfelt story, like Anna was saying, you know, getting to the emotion of it, and pick a few arguments and make those well. And that get back to the being concise. And yeah, so like that's those the meat of it, is that it's just a few things. It's just making sure that you're clear about your statement, that you've made a few arguments, and that you've done a concise job making them. So thinking about framing, then you can think about Jewish values. A lot of times people find it helpful to, you know, when you think about an issue like Anna was talking about immigration, so you think about it and you're like, okay, what do I know from Jewish texts that goes with this issue, you know, of immigration? And you start thinking about, okay, we were once strangers, and, you know, how does that, you know, where are those pieces of text? And so you can have that sort of right at the top and then be referring back to it. Like you can use it to illustrate your point. There's a lot of ways that Jewish text can fit in, and it can be a helpful tool to use if you're sitting there thinking, because I've heard a lot from people before, like, I'm not an expert, I don't know, like, where does it come in? And the Jewish text can be a really helpful framing for you to sort of build your argument, your position around. And it might not be Jewish framing too. Like, you know, you could have that personal story to be able to say, like, I am a child of immigrants. I have a child who is an immigrant to this country. Those are things that are really personal and very, you know, compelling and important, and mean that, you know, you're going to have a big, deep well to tell that story from. So those are different ways that you can approach it. And sometimes it's just very straightforward. I, you know, have written a lot of testimony on bills that have to do with prison reform. And I have never been somebody who has ever spent time in prison, but that doesn't mean that I don't have an opinion on it. And my opinion is still valid. And so I can write the testimony from there. So just depends on where you're going to be able to draw that connection and have your sort of writing come from that. Again, you don't have to be an expert. If you've got that emotional, personal story, that's enough. And, you know, those emotions can be really, really moving. And I'm going to actually ask Eliana, do we have time to share? Were we still planning on sharing the clip of Scott's testimony?
I think we're all good on time.
Got it. I couldn't remember what we had decided.
Can
So I think
folks
this is from
see this
2 weeks ago.
okay? Yeah. Are folks able to read this okay? Should I zoom in on the screen?
You could probably zoom a little.
Great. And as we look at this, I will just highlight some of the things that Sam pointed out earlier, which is that you can see that this piece of testimony begins with really clearly stating the position that Stott was taking. And then I think we can just give folks a second to look at this piece of testimony and see that really great personal story.
So we'll make sure that Scott's testimony is available for you guys if you ever want to, be able to refer back to this again. There's actually, we'll show you guys where you can see other JFJ testimony to refer back to get some ideas and see how it's all set up as well. So when we go back, we can go back to the slides now. But if you want to go back and read it all the way through, you'll definitely be able to do that. Okay, so that's sort of that emotional, personal story. And then, there's also just the constituent side of it too, that you're not an expert, but your expertise lives in just being the constituent, right? The person who lives in this community, and you get to have a say about how you want your community to be and what you want it to be like. And so an example that's like that, rather than that personal story, is from Claire Landers.
I just put the link to this piece of testimony in the chat. Like Sam said, all of this will be sent out to you afterwards. And also, again, highlighting what Sam said, this is a really great example of testimony in which there isn't like a directly impacted direct connection, but Claire, as like an expert in her own experience, an expert in what sort of community she envisions, is able to write really, really compelling testimony.
Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about where you can draw your inspiration from, that you don't have to be the expert, that you as just a person who lives in this community, you have something important to say. But how does this all fit into what actually happens with the General Assembly? So the General Assembly always convenes at the beginning of January. Usually it depends on like when the new year starts, but it's usually like the second week of January. Then that means that for the first few weeks is just them like getting bills in, getting them assigned to their committees, all of the sort of, they have to start figuring out, like reading the bills and learning about the information. So they won't start actually holding hearings where we can give testimony until usually February. But this year's just, you know, it's a fun year because second year of a pandemic. You may have heard that there might be a special session. That means that a special session means that they're holding a session outside of their regular scheduled time. That will probably last for 2 days in December, early December. There will be 2 days of special session. They are not going to hear any bills at that time. It has to do with because the census happened, they need to approve the redistricting maps that have been drawn so that that can all go into place for the next election. We don't know how that will influence when things start. For this, if they don't get all of their business done from the special session, they might need to take it up during the regular session. So there's a lot of stuff in the air. Plus, this is the last year of this General Assembly before an election, which means that anything that doesn't get concluded this year is wiped off the slate and they have to start all over again. So that just puts so much more pressure. So we can never say never, but we think that it'll be early February when they'll actually start having hearings. So that means that's when your testimony would be due. That's the whole point for you guys, is that's when testimony would start to come due. But it'll go from February through March that you'll be submitting stuff if you're submitting on more than one issue. That being said, start writing as soon as you can, because again, like Mark Twain said, the more time you have, the more concise you can be. So if you already know, like, oh man, if there's a bill that comes up this year, I heard about at the kickoff all about the Time to Care Act, like start writing about it. If you've got that personal story about, needing to, be able to take off work because of a health issue, then like you need to be, writing that story down now. You don't have to know what the bill number is. You don't have to know what the name of it is. Just start sketching it. Okay. The other thing that you can do is let us know. So the earlier you let us know that you're interested in writing testimony, the better, because it helps the staff prepare for how much testimony they think they're going to, is going to be coming in. And that way, if there's an issue that no one has submitted interest in, they can start to like ask people, can you also do, cover this issue as well? It also means that if you are somebody who thinks that you might want a testimony mentor, somebody to help you, because it's maybe your first time writing testimony or you're not sure about this particular issue, it gives them more time to get you set up with a mentor, and it gives you more time, or your mentor more time to work with you. So if you use that link, which Eliana's going to show us. So if you go to that link, and we'll make sure that you have this. This is not the only time that you're going to see this link. Eliana's dropping it in the chat. This will also be shared with you in an email. It's also on our website. So you can fill it out. It's pretty easy. You just click on, those are the 3 issues that you are specifically interested in. And then you can say if you would like a testimony mentor or not. If you say, let's say that you click off all 5 of those issues because you're feeling really raring to go. And then January 1st rolls around and you're like, wow, my winter does not look like I thought it was going to. I can only write for 2 of those issues. That's okay. Eliana's not going to show up at your door and like, hit you with like a balloon or something like that. Like it's okay if you overcommit yourself and then have to pull back. You're not in trouble. But it just gives, it's just a rough idea right now of, what people are available to help with. And same thing with the testimony mentor. If you're not sure, just say that you want one now, because, like I've mentored people, and if I email you and I say, hey, when do you want to meet? And you could say, yeah, I actually don't need to. I'm not going to be offended. It's fine. No one will be offended. So all of that. It's okay. It's okay. And then anything else that you need people to know about. So like if, for example, you actually are a doctor and you wanted to write about paid family medical leave, that might be an extra little interesting tidbit for Eliana and the staff to know, because they might need to, use that angle of testimony if they decide that that JFJ needs to submit somebody for oral testimony. Typically, we only have one person from JFJ give oral testimony on any given issue. And same thing for the written testimony. We could have 30 JFJ members submit written testimony on an issue like paid family medical leave, but only one of those people will be the official JFJ testimony. So it'll go on the JFJ letterhead. Everyone else is just going to be as a constituent. So that's something else to think about. And if you if you've got that extra little something, you can add that in there. And if you don't, it's okay. We don't not value you. We value all the testimony. Okay. So the process. This is going to seem like a lot of information coming at you. If you're overwhelmed, it's okay. This is again, not the only time you ever can hear about this. We're recording this right now. You could always go back and rewatch it if you want to. You can always email the staff, email me. There's a bunch of leaders who are happy to help. So this is going to be a lot, and just take in what you can. Okay, so let's go to the testimony guide part of the website. And Eliana also just dropped it in the chat for you if you want to pull it up on your computer. Okay, so that's where you're going to say, I want to testify, so that we were just talking about. That's how you let the staff know that you want to. If you already have something that you're ready to submit, you're going to click over there. So there's all these different buttons on it, on the website. And then what else does it look like when we scroll down? Okay, right, we got our templates. So these, there's templates for each of the different big issues. So for example, court and prison reform, there's a template for that, but it's not going to be a template for each specific bill. It's just sort of based on the committee that we, assume it's going to go to. So judicial proceedings and the judiciary are the places that would hear about court and prison reform issues. Economic matters and finance are where you're going to have your paid family medical leave. And then the button that says template that can be edited to use for any committee. If for some reason one of our bills is not in a financial or judicial committee, then that's the template you would use for yourself. Any of them really can be edited for any purpose that you have. So if, for example, you were to then give testimony at the Montgomery County Council, you could use this as a general template. There's just certain parts of it that you'll need to edit, because you don't want it to say that it's going to the Judicial Proceedings Committee if it's going to the Montgomery County Council. So Eliana, can we click on one just to see what it looks like? Okay, so you're going to make a copy, because you obviously don't want to edit the official JFJ one, because then that would be bad if it wasn't a template anymore. So you'll make a copy, and then you have your own copy. You can save this as a Word document for yourself if you want. If you use Google, then you can just rename it from copy of JFJ testimony to, Sam's testimony for bill number 123. So whatever I would, whatever I want to call it. Hopefully the template seems pretty straightforward. So it's got all the things that you need to enter in, having the date of the hearing, your name, and being able to identify where you're from, is so that your representative knows that, yes, I am in your district. It's already has the to part filled in, because that's where it is specific to that committee. And then it is just reminding you of all the good stuff we've been talking about with what to put in for the framing and the body of it. And it's got a couple of neat little reminders, trying to rebut arguments that the other side might have detracts from your argument. So you want to sort of just stick to the facts, ma'am, as they say in Dragnet. So keep it to the facts. That helps you keep it short and sweet, rather than trying to rebut every silly argument that some other doofus might come up with. Yeah, so hopefully that is easy for you guys to use.
Great, thanks, Sam. Before we click away from this, I just want to reiterate some of the things that Sam said a couple minutes ago. So as Sam said, it's never too early to start writing testimony. So there might be things that we don't know yet, right? We might not know the Senate bill number or the House bill number. And once that information becomes available, staff will be sure to get it to you. So that way you can be updating your testimony. In terms of whether or not we are in support of a bill, in support of a bill if it's amended, or against the bill, our position is consistent with that of the coalitions that JUFJ works in. And one of the resources that we will email out are one-pagers. And this is like another thing that you will be kept up to date on as information becomes available about particular bills. And I think, Sam, I will hand it back to you.
Yeah, and something else to know, there's very rarely a time where we'll say we're in support with amendments. So if you're not sure, then like don't, like that is, your default should be like we're in support of something, because staff will be very specific, because we want to make sure that if we are in support with an amendment, that we are very specific on what that amendment is. So no one's going to let you be like sort of sloppy in that language. So if you don't know about it, then it's not a thing.
Great, thanks. And before we go back to the slides and keep throwing information at you, we wanted to pause and see if folks have questions about the content of testimony. If you have questions about like the tech pieces, how Google Docs work, how to make a copy, all of those things, I'll be staying on after the call and we can take tech questions then. But let's just pause for a moment. And if folks have questions on content, you can unmute or feel free to put that in the chat.
Please. I think sometimes people shoo written testimony, like it isn't important, it isn't going to be read. And it's just so important, because not only do the sponsors, but the delegates on the committees and their staff read the testimony, and the personal stories are, or the story of self is really important. So I think, you know, I'm going to go over the next month and just start drafting my talking points, and some may contradict the other, but it will be up to me to select so that there is a smooth kind of flow and narrative to the testimony. But I do think it's important.
That's an excellent point, Louise. Yes, the bill sponsors absolutely look at your testimony, and it's important for them because they know that you're supporting them. They know that they should push forward on this issue and not rescind their bill because it's not getting enough traction. And it's something that they can bring up when they are meeting with the committee. They can hold up and say, I've got all these testimony, pieces of testimony. I read this one story about this woman, Louise, and she had this story to share. So that, yeah, it really does add to the power.
How much time? I know it's such a unknowable in terms of turning in testimony, but is there a preferred process for getting it uploaded into the staff so the staff can actually edit it?
So we're going to get to that. So I'm gonna put pause on that.
Okay,
because we'll cover that. You're leading us right next into the next one.
And Cap, in a similar vein, we'll talk in just a minute about what it actually looks like to be submitting testimony. It isn't usually done in an email format.
Okay. So those testimony resources that Eliana was talking about, the issue one-pagers, these will all be made available to you. These slides are going to be shared with you. So if you want to go through and find it in the slideshow, that'll be there. There's going to be like 10 different ways that this will all be available to you. So that's what an issue one-pager looks like. Testimony examples, like we said before, like Claire's that we were glancing at. So these Testimony Tuesdays go back several years. It's testimony from across JOFJ. So it's going to have DC testimony, Montgomery County, and Baltimore City, as well as statewide. And all of them are valid as just good examples of how to write a convincing argument. And then we've got just all these other resources. So if you, want to know more about court and prison reform issues, then there's all these resources. We've got, I think we're also collecting articles. Yeah, so that's where the articles are too. So if you want to just read old articles from different newspapers, you've got information there as well. And you're of course welcome and encouraged to do your own research if you want to, but also don't feel like you have to. This should not feel like a school project. So if the only time that you have, because you're living a very busy life, is that this is what I care about and I know my own mind, that's enough. Okay, so the submission process. It's going to be a two-step process. This is the part that has changed drastically since last year. It's going to be two-step. The first step is to submit your testimony to JOFJ, and it's not going to get edited this year by staff because last year, Rihanna spent all of her time from January through the beginning of April just doing that, and the staff lost her to any other work. I think it was hundreds of hours. So staff have decided, leaders have decided that you all are perfectly lovely and brilliant people. And if you need help, reach out for help, get a testimony mentor. You can certainly ask staff about a point that you're trying to make, but you don't need to be edited. So what you're going to do is submit to JOFJ because JOFJ likes to have a record of it. There should be a record on the General Assembly website, but we don't want to count on that. So we want to have record of it so we can load it for our Testimony Tuesdays so that we know how many pieces of testimony we submitted on an issue. So you're going to do that, and then you will upload it to the General Assembly website. So that also means that you'll need two versions of it. You'll need a Google Doc version. That's the one that'll go to the JOFJ staff, because they're going to be collecting it into a spreadsheet, and then a PDF version. So if you don't know how to have those two versions, Eliana's going to stay on after. She can talk to you about it. If she talks to you about it and then in 2 weeks you're like, I absolutely forgot how to make a PDF, that's fine. Just email Eliana. She's more than happy to help you, because the PDF version is the one that you're going to submit to the General Assembly website. Again, we don't exactly know. It's possible that they're going to make us submit it in person and this will become a sort of moot point, but we're assuming this is all on the assumption that it's like last year. We will also, we being staff leaders, anyone that you know can help you is very happy to help you figure out how to submit to the General Assembly website. So if that is something that you want help doing, we can help you do that. Does that part make sense to everyone? Before we move on, I just want to make sure that everyone understood the two-part process. Okay. So when you click on that button that says that you're ready to submit, this is what you'll see. So you get a congratulations. It reminds you about the two-step submission. It walks you through it on how to share the two things. So for sharing to JOFJ, you put all your information at the top, the bill number, which you should know by then because you're submitting your testimony, so you should have all that information. And then you're going to paste the link to your Google Doc in that box. So we're asking, instead of pasting your full testimony, it's just the link, because this is going to go into like a spreadsheet. And so rather than filling the spreadsheet up with your nice big juicy testimony, it'll just be like Eliana's doing. So, okay, here's the important part that Eliana just did. You want to make sure that your link says that anyone with the link is able to edit it. And that is not because they're going to change your testimony, that's just so they can format it so that it can go on the website. If you don't want your testimony to go on the website, there's a spot where you can say that later, but they need to be able to format it just so that they can read it properly when they're trying to do stuff with it. So then she's pasting that link right in there. What issue it falls under. And then this is the part where if you're like, oh, I'm a little shy, I don't want it to go on the website, that's perfectly okay. So you have the option of maximizing the impact, meaning that JFJ can share it out however they want. Or maybe you want to sort of minimize how it's used. So you just pick the things that you're comfortable with. So you could say, please don't share it outside of the hearings in Annapolis. And then JFJ will not share it outside of the hearings in Annapolis. And then, of course, if you have any question for staff. But again, staff not planning to edit it. So if you want the staff, if your question is, does this look good? Email a staff member separately and ask them that. If you want somebody to look over your testimony, don't do it through that form, unless, I guess we don't know what the session's going to look like. So it could end up that like Laura or Eliana, somebody says, yes, do it that way. But for right now, contact them separately to see how they'd like to look at it for an edit for you. And then it's going to remind you, you're not done, because you still need to go to the General Assembly website to submit that PDF.
Great. And before we move on, I just want to reiterate again, we know that this process is new. So as we're going through this process this year, we definitely want to hear from you on what's working well, what should be changed, what can we be refining. I also want to reiterate that staff and testimony mentors are absolutely here to support you throughout this process. And if you're feeling like tech questions in this moment, again, Sam and I will both be on after the call to be showing some of those tech pieces again. And one more piece I just wanted to draw out is why we're asking folks to submit testimony to the General Assembly themselves this year. So last year, JUFJ, Rihanna on staff, submitted everybody's testimony to the General Assembly. And what that meant was in the system, even though Rihanna was submitting, let's say 15 pieces of testimony for a single bill, it was all showing up as coming from JUFJ in the system. And that meant it was really easy for legislators to perceive it as all one thing from JUFJ. So we're hoping that this year, with folks submitting it individually, it will be more powerful to our legislators. And again, if there are questions on this or any of these tech pieces, we'd love to talk them through after the call. And Sam, I will hand it back to you.
Yeah, it's that whole the 15 pieces of testimony versus one thing that looks like it's 15 pages. So we want to maximize that impact. Okay, so assuming that it's just like last year and we cannot go in person to attend hearings, then what we're doing is we're attending them virtually. So T-shirts in the room is what we say thanks to a lovely interaction that Carol Stern had with her senator, who mentioned that she always feels sort of buoyed up when she sees the blue T-shirts that are sitting in the committee room when she when we're there to support something that she's speaking on. So we like to still have those t-shirts in the room, even if we're not there in person. So you can always attend hearings virtually. We're hoping that they will continue to be very good about broadcasting them through Zoom. That should continue. I will be very disappointed if it doesn't. It's a really good way to support the issues, but also for you to like just see what the process is. It demystifies it. The party, we called them watch parties last year. It's great actually, because when you're there in person, you have to whisper to the person next to you and hopefully hope that your whisper doesn't carry. And when you're on Zoom, you can type in the chat all you want and say like, why did that person just say that? And what is going on? Like, I thought that we were talking about this issue, and there's, you know, all these knowledgeable people to explain it to you, and you don't have to keep your voice down. So if you are so inclined, you can buy a JUFJ t-shirt online, and then staff will make sure that it gets to you. So it might be a drop off, it could be mailed to you, that we'll figure it out, but it's not quite like a regular online store where it just automatically ships to you. So you can still buy that t-shirt so that if you are watching testimony or perhaps get to give oral testimony, you can be in your shirt. You can also download a JOFJ Zoom background. And you can have that background on while watching or giving testimony. And that's just another way to let everyone know, you know, what you're there for and who you're showing up for. Okay, so the takeaways, the next steps for what we're doing here. So make sure that you fill out the testimony interest form. Again, you can sign up and say that you're interested for everything or just one thing. And it's, excuse me, it is all useful. Even if you only have time to give one piece of testimony, that is so useful. We don't get 200 pieces of testimony because there's only 10 people doing it all, right? It's a lot of individuals who have time for one thing. So there are going to be follow-up emails with the recording of this, with the slides. Staff are always available to answer questions. Your mentor will follow up with you if you do ask for one. And if you think that, you know, if you've been talking to somebody else who's in JFJ or maybe not in JFJ, but thinks that they might want to be in JFJ and just wishes they knew more about all this process, invite them to come on Wednesday, where we will have the rewind session. So this recording will be played and Laura will be there to answer any questions. And Eliana just dropped like 10 links for all these things that I just talked about. And we also have more Annapolis Academy coming up. So there's more trainings beyond just Annapolis 101 and Testimony 101. So what else do we have coming up? Okay, so there's the Advocacy 101, so that's actually meeting and speaking with your legislator. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, that's a good one to attend. And then how to actually have your legislator meeting. So that's where what we used to call house meetings, but right now we're not meeting in people's homes, so they are virtual, those legislator meetings. So how to do that as well. And then of course there's all the rewind. So if you can't make the initial thing, that's okay, because there will be a replay of everything. And then our issues, our legislators, just talking about the issues that we're covering and learn more about, you know, the legislators that are supporting our issues, the ones that we need to convince of our issues. Okay, so lots of resources again. So if you don't know your district, or maybe you know your district, but you're talking to a friend who doesn't know theirs and you're not sure how to find out, there's links for that. And super simple how to do that. You just need to be able to put in your address, and we can tell you who your local officials are. And then, of course, the JFJ Maryland homepage, which is all the things that we talked about that we said is on the website, you can pretty easily navigate to straight from the Maryland homepage from the JFJ website. It's as somebody who does not like clicking around on websites, I have found the JFJ one actually pretty easy because Sam Baltimore works very hard to make sure it's just like that. And then action alerts, you always get those as emails, but if you delete the email and you're looking for it later and you want to fill out an action alert, they're always up on the website as well. Some good local newspapers that cover the General Assembly. And then, of course, the Maryland General Assembly website. I highly recommend clicking around on that. It is, once you know how to navigate it, it's super useful and you can get to stuff pretty quickly once you sort of learn how everything's all set up.
Is the Google Doc shared with or sent to JUFJ? It's the information somehow or other is going to magically show up on a spreadsheet. Is that spreadsheet going to be accessible to the members so they can get some ideas about, if they clicked on the link, they could see the testimony and, think about how they can replicate or do something similar?
Louise, are you referring to the big spreadsheet that we had last year that was for tracking testimony or something else?
No, I mean, I thought I heard, and I could be wrong, that this year, instead of submitting it for editing, the testimony for editing, it's going to be sent as a Google Doc to the staff and PDF to the General Assembly. So if it's going to the staff and you've got all the testimony in-house, is there a way that is helpful and doesn't put staff in the same overwhelmed position to be able to share the different testimony with the members? So, if you're writing testimony on criminal justice, if you're writing testimony on immigrant justice, like here's some helpful links. And I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I have a couple of different answers to it. One is your testimony mentor, if you choose to connect with one, is somebody who has a ton of experience writing testimony and can help you find those things and can speak from their own experience. The second place I would point people to, and we'll see if I can click on the right tab, is we have a ton of examples of old testimony on the JUFJ website. Okay. And the third thing that I will say, the most direct answer to your question, again, looking for the right tab, when you submit testimony, you will have the option, and I'll pull that up in just a second, to click how you want that testimony to be maximized, its impact to be maximized if you do. So I think for folks that are interested in having testimony shared, it will be available to other JUFJers.
Okay.
But if that's not something that folks want, they'll have the option to say, no thanks, I actually just want this testimony to be shared with JUFJ staff and I want to submit it to the General Assembly.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, so supporting some of the work, of course, you can always donate to JUFJ, and then some of our partners, CASA, that's our partner who leads us on all of the immigration issues. Out for Justice is our partner who leads us in a lot of the prison reform issues. And then Baltimore Action Legal Team is where I work and one of our partners. And if you're so inclined to donate to our bail fund or our electronic monitoring fund. Okay, so this is super helpful to us. If you guys have feedback about what the website looked like or the pages look like, and maybe you don't right now because you want to go and click on it, and that's absolutely okay. You can always give feedback later. But if you have any thoughts about that, about this training, or just anything else, any feedback, feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can go off mute and let us know. And then if you have questions, also let us know. And we really appreciate you guys coming.